rebidding would likely not decrease the bid amount. And fiscal 23, if you remember, we actually provided for this project without grant revenues for fiscal 23 as part of this project. And we did put in fiscal 24, this project with grant revenues.
Okay, I'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this item? Hearing C and none, I'll close the public hearing. Was there comment?
Sorry, I looked up after all my reading and I went, it emptied out quick.
And it got quiet.
Yeah, it did. Okay. Public meeting is closed. Consider resolution approving plan specifications, form of contract, and awarding the Decorah generators project.
Luce would move we accept the bid, but Decorah Electric. Second.
Motion made by Luz, seconded by Olson to accept the project plans as stated. Any other discussion? Hearing seen none, roll call.
Luce,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Zittergruen, Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel.
Motion carried. Consider resolution of necessity for the Decorah 2023 alley improvement project. You want to give a little bit of background on that?
Yeah,
Kevin?
so a resolution necessity is required for a project where we'll do or at least have the potential for an assessments. And so the project includes the the alley south of Center Avenue between Riverside and Second Street. And those assessments are drafted based on our February 20th meeting with the policy that was set. This resolution would set a hearing for the April 3rd council meeting, and then we would publish in the newspaper and mail to the affected properties.
Okay, thank you.
Luce would move the resolution. Second.
Motion made by Luz, seconded by Olson to move the resolution. Any further discussion? Hearing seen none, roll call.
Luce,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel, Neal.
Aye.
Motion carried. Consider resolution setting public hearing for fiscal year 24 budget. Travis?
All right. So a public hearing is required prior to adoption of city's budget. Staff has prepared an amended proposed budget based on the council's discussion at last week's work session. If you remember last week, staff was directed to prepare 50, 75, and 100,000, and we did prepare those. However, included in the packet and recommended by council is $100,000 in cuts to put us in a better position for years future. And so prepared, I don't want to necessarily beat a legislative dead horse, but again, SF 181 lowered the general fund revenues by 85,000, but increased the total levy by 20 cents to $16.35 and change on the original proposed budget prior to staff proposed cuts. The options presented by staff, option A, PD would have a reduction in 10,000. Parks would have a reduction of 10,000. IT would be 5. Sustainability would have a reduction of 25 and then move to the general fund. Library is 50,000. And for B, PD reduction would be 10, parks reduction 10, IT 5, sustainability 15, and move to general fund, and library at 65,000. Obviously, library would be taking the largest hit of this. With this structuring, there'd be some realized savings and further reduction on the employee levies side. So as a result, this would actually cut the levy back down further to $16.29 and some change. But I do want to remind council and public as well, go on record. I'm memorializing this because next year when we have this discussion again, we're using essentially all of police and fire retirement savings of 85,000 and using 125,000 in lost to repay Locust Road debt and buy down the total levy. Next year, police and fire savings will be exhausted, which will increase the levy by about 21 cents.
Okay. Is there some reason why A is 100,000 and B is 105,000? Is there
Uh,
a reason for that or?
We bounce between 10 and 15 on the sustainability side. And so ultimately we went with
15.
15.
Okay.
Is this taking in consideration then a forest utility? So that would come out of sustainability?
This is not, this would be proposed, but ultimately we don't have that prepared yet. So I
Okay.
don't know if that's what council wants to do moving forward.
Okay, and then my other question is, well, no, I have other questions, but, does this also take into consideration, our removal of the nonprofit
Correct.
donations?
Yes.
Okay.
It does.
And then my other question is, I thought that we had, I thought that the idea was that we wanted to keep the levy on the higher side
Mhm.
so that if whatever 1125 or 1124 passes, that 2% could be, so are we doing ourselves a disservice by artificially lowering our levy with our police and fire? And should we keep that actually as a emergency?
As it stands today, those levies would not be part of the capped growth. The employee benefits levies, which is what's being reduced there,
Mhm.
and the debt service are not capped. The emergency levy and the 810, as well as many of the other we'll call them general fund support levies, like the library, the voter approved library levy would go away. The for music, for a community band, ones for community civic center, several of those would go away under 1120.
Right, so it's not the total levy rate that we're buying down, it's just the debt service levy.
Debt service and employee benefits.
Okay, and we can't use that money to buy down the general levy.
Correct. Well,
You know what I'm saying?
correct. Yes.
You,
I just wanted to replay a couple scenarios in my head just to make sure.
so you can't.
Local option sales tax has to be used for road infrastructure projects. And so unless we're using it to support road infrastructure, I don't know that that's how we're using it for Locust Road. To buy down-
Right. Well, I
Buy
mean,
down
well,
the debt.
no, using the 125,000 to buy down Locust Road to me makes
Mm-hmm.
total sense. That
Yep.
is but it was the 85,000 that I was wondering more about if that is something we wanted to hold on to. I know our levy rate will be higher this year, but
Mhm.
in some ways, if we have if we have a really low rate this year, and then all of a sudden we have a really high rate next year, I guess I would rather aim a little higher this year, and then it's not going to be such a hit next year. And then keep that 85,000 for when we need it, but just in lieu of all the bills that are coming in.
What was the reason for deciding to use that 85,000?
Well, originally it kept the levy down to 1615 and change,
Right.
as opposed to the year previously, we were at 1596.
5 or something like that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Emily, I think there's wisdom there. I guess I'd be fine with that approach. That said, this seems to me to be a bit of an analog towards any other ongoing perpetual expense, which is just to say that, once this 85 is gone, we're stuck with it. And you kind of said we shouldn't make cuts to things to get a one-time boost. This seems to me to be like almost the opposite of, or kind of a parallel to that, like we're bringing in a little bit more this year to get that kind of, boost for this year. Maybe we just got to bite the bullet and I don't know. I guess I'd be fine with it. That's the long and short of it, but.
My logic isn't actually about this. My logic is just that if we're at 16, I'm going to make a number up for next year, right? If we keep it at 1629 this year and then have to go to 1650 next year, people might be like, what happened? Even though what's really happening is this year. Do you know what I mean? I mean, this year and next year, but we are artificially, in my mind, I just think people should understand that the implications of what's happening at the state is really affecting their property taxes this year. And maybe they'll push a little harder next year to be like, don't do this again to us. But it's a political move. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I guess.
I mean,
Well, is it a political move or is it the right move?
well, I mean, I think
We're not
there's,
borrowing that $85,000 down out of that fund.
yeah, I mean,
Wait until we have to, maybe.
really what we're doing is using savings to mask what is a giant hit to our general fund.
Right.
We've used some of those savings every year for the past X years though. And so I just, maybe we should just be consistent with what we've done, not use it all, but use a percentage of it. I don't think it's a terribly big decision.
So fiscal 23, we used 125 or 75. Do you have to remember? Pull it up quick.
Weren't you telling me today, Travis, that you hated when people did that to you? And then you just did it to yourself.
I know. I don't like playing stump the city manager. He's got to hurry up and figure it out.
Take a breath and work with it.
Randy, do you have a thought on the 83? Should we buy down the levy or leave it on the books?
You talking about 85?
The 85, thank you.
One of those you're gonna use. But now then you're just gonna have to sharpen pencils next year. Figure it out. Buying it down this year, but we did have some extraordinary increases in our benefits this year. Those next year might not. Don't know. Because we've gone through years where we've only used 25 or 30 out of this because our increases have only been 1 or 2% on benefits.
It's a lot.
18%.
Health insurance was 10%, liability insurance, right, that's the 18.
You know, we've been down low single digits last week. I don't have a problem.
That actually makes me want to save it even more. If it's historically not been that great, then that 85 might last us a little bit longer to take care of some of that percentage.
One time you will hear me say, if I can go and grab my budget book, I know right where it's at. 1 second.
I'll give you a second to go and do that. Yeah. I can just make a comment how much I've appreciated what the department heads have done as far as working cooperatively together to reach whichever way we look at it.
Can we ask questions even when Travis is gone? If I want to ask if Kirsten,
Um,
he already knows the answer, so.
yeah,
Okay, I'm curious what the difference between, so if the library reduction is 50,000, well, how is that different than if it's 65?
Ultimately, that would be a change in further reductions of operational costs.
Can you give me any, I know you probably,
The only real places in our operations budget that are not fixed include the book budget, programming, marketing, a little bit of staff training, a small portion of our technology budget. Most of our other expenses are, building repairs, utilities, fixed costs. So ultimately, the more expensive version reflects a bigger reduction in some of those areas. That being said, some of those areas are appropriate for us to use some of our donated funds or Friends of the Library funds for. There are some portions of our operations budget where that's not appropriate, right? We can't pay our utility bill with donated funds. That's not the intention. And some of those funds are designated for specific things. But we do have some funds that are designated for programming, for collections related work. So we would be able to offset those decreases in that fashion.
Is the difference between the 50 and 65 hours of operation?
No, we
Okay.
do not anticipate a change in hours of operation. That being said, this is a different sort of change than we've made before. So to some extent, we'll sort of be feeling our way along. We have modeled a variety of schedule options for staff, even with the proposed reductions, and we believe that we can maintain our current hours. But we'll also have to kind of see how things go as we go through periods of time where, you know, multiple people are sick at the same time and or we're dealing with vacations, et cetera. But we don't anticipate having to change hours of operation at this point.
Okay, and then 50 or 65, it's still a reduction of 3 full-time positions to have at both levels.
Yes.
10% reduction in staffing costs is
How,
So we go back to what we were working.
I was just gonna interject.
And just hold the
Fif-
question and bring it back.
50,000 in savings from municipal police and fire use last year and 125,000 from lost last year. That brought the total levy down 45 cents last year.
Just go ahead and finish your conversation or if you're done.
oh, well, I lost my train of thought there for a minute. How, if we go the forest utility route, how long could we change this budget with that idea in play?
Yeah.
Okay,
Because the biggest thing to remember off the budget is the budget gives us two things. One, levied property taxes. Two, expense authority.
Okay.
So the thing you cannot change, like that can't be fixed later on down the road, is the property tax dollars levied.
sure.
If there's additional revenue through an urban forest utility, that additional expenses can be covered by that, and we start moving things around. That can be done afterwards.
So I'm inclined, I like option A as we feel our way through this, only if we go with the forest utility. We don't go with the forest utility, then I'm more inclined to go with option B.
Other thoughts? What type of utility did you say?
The forest utility.
Oh, correct. Okay.
So
I got you. The forester. Utility.
do both of the options, I mean, I think, am I right that they don't include the library benefits savings in addition, and that's like $20,000-ish. So really, we're talking about 120 or 125.
Correct. The 100,000 plus and for option A and B, those are general fund specific. So on top of that, based on some structural changes, there's some additional about 21,000 in potential staff employee benefits savings.
Okay. That would be for either one, correct?
But the levy
Correct.
still ends up being 1629 when we had said it was going to be 1616 essentially.
Correct. And again, for showing SF 181, if you look at your budget workbook, I do have under chapter 4 budget options, you see the staff proposed 100,000 plus cuts. On the second page of that says after SF 181, the levy would have been 1635 and change. And before 181, that levy would have been 1615 and change. Changing nothing other than that bill.
I guess I'd be more inclined to go with option A, just because I don't like hitting the library as hard as option B hits it. I prefer to stick to the 50 rather than the 65.
And forest utility?
All in favor.
I feel like at our work session, we're in favor.
Take
of it.
everyone.
Yep, you said to
Everyone.
draft, get it drafted, but
Yeah.
did not want to necessarily count my chickens before they're hatched.
Right.
While we're talking about forest utility, I think the prevailing assumption is that we would attempt to get the price to basically cover the forester's salary. But that's not the only thing that you could include under the umbrella of a forest utility. Is that accurate?
Right, yeah, it could include pretty much all operations related to the tree canopy, so grinding out at the compost site, it could, all equipment, even the leaf collection equipment, we could cover that. If we really wanted to get into dissecting, we could even attribute additional staff time, whether it's park staff time or street department staff time, anything associated with tree work could be covered under it.
Oh, definitely in favor.
Should we just start with the salary and we can consider future changes if it makes sense to us? What are y'all thinking?
That is what I would encourage.
Okay,
Yeah, oh yeah, that's. what I
Until we
was
get the
thinking.
established.
great. Thank you.
So you're looking for a motion for,
Well, ultimately, council does need to set a public hearing yet, so we do need a motion. Again, I'll point out that a public hearing would be set for April 3rd with this proposed resolution. The council could adopt any decrease to the proposed proposed amounts at the hearing. It could be less, but it cannot be more.
okay,
Can
Can
you-
Option A or B is not important to the hearing
Setting.
notice because
Okay.
those are fund specific.
Okay.
and tell me, I know you just said the number. If we don't use the 85,000, what's the levy?
I don't think I
Okay,
did
good.
say that number yet, but okay. All right, yeah, I did 21 cents. It would be 21 cents higher.
So it'd be 1640. So if everything stays the same in the city next year, and nothing increases and nothing decreases, and our budget was to be exactly the same, then next year's levy would be 1640.
That's assuming a lot of things stay the same, but yeah, that's
So
assuming total taxable
I said,
valuation.
I said if everything
If
absolutely stays the same, we
everything.
know we're looking at 1640. I guess I am tempted to say, what if we split the difference and said, let's pay down 40 this year and 40 next?
Yeah, I was going to suggest the same. I think since it seems, it smooths it out a bit. And it also helps people realize that these choices are having consequences. We're not using money to artificially depress the levy that the state's taken from us. So yeah, I think that'd be fine.
So essentially would change the levy rate 10 cents.
Correct.
Right.
so it'd be 1639? What would be the levy rate?
No, it'd be 1639. Going to change just 10 cents. Because
That's what it was without the staff proposed cuts.
Yeah.
Yep.
With things as they're currently contemplated, could you help me understand the implications for the sustainability fund? It seems to me that they're not losing, but if we go ahead with the forestry, they would no longer have that salary coming out of their budget. But meanwhile, we'd be transferring either 15 or 25 out of the budget into the general fund. So they would end up with a net positive position compared to previous years.
So if those are lumped together, yes, those are both actions, and that's assuming those the electric franchise fees revenues that are in the sustainability fund do not move into the general with the urban forest utility being established. So if they stay there and they don't move anywhere, yes, there would be a net positive. But that's in revenues, because there is a difference between their budgeted expenditures, which they still have to come to council for individual approval to expend. But the budget authority exists is not for their full balance of designated funds.
I think I know where you're going. I don't think they need, I would like to see for the baby step this, right? Let's get the urban forestry, take the forestry and move it out of sustainability funds, give 25,000 to the general fund from sustainability, but not both, right? Not take the forest funds into general and 25. But then if we decide next year that's something we want to look at, we can at that point. But right now I'd like to, so we'd just essentially be reducing by the 25,000, not 25,000 plus the forester.
Okay, so right now, as it's drafted, I just want to be clear, what's drafted right now doesn't consider forest utility at all. And that can still be done after the budget's approved and everything. So the question becomes, you want 15,000 or 25,000 hit for sustainability, regardless of the outcome, because even that discussion on the forester's salary that's paid out of those electric franchise fees, if and when a urban forest utility is established and we transfer that expense over to that conversation could still be had on how much of that electric franchise fees moves.
Yeah.
And where.
Yeah, I don't think you were accurately predicting where I was going with that. I wanted, I guess, to make sure that, you know, we have a mechanism someday to make sustainability whole again. You know, if they
Right.
transfer 15 now, we
Right.
take 70 off their books. Well, I want to remember that and not assume that we can then take 70 away from their budget, but point to the 15 we're contemplating right now as the start.
Right.
Or 25 or whatever. Yeah.
Either one, whether it's A or B.
So are we in agreement on the 50% of the using 50% of the pension funds to buy down the levy, council? I mean, and I've heard two people say option A. I'd be fine with it.
So what type of motion would you, first you want to do that?
I need a motion, and most importantly, A or B helps us when we assign the line items within the departments.
Okay.
But so please feel free to include that. But the main thing to consider here is if we are doing 40,000 as opposed to 85,000 on the savings, that needs to be articulated.
Yep.
'Cause that will change the dollar amount on the property taxes levied.
You said 45 is half of it?
42.5 would be half. I
So
think there's some interest that's been gained, so there's a little bit extra than that, but
I will make a motion that we set a levy rate consistent with using 42.5 of police and fire retirement. Option A with the condition that we have a forest utility. And the reduction, well, we're gonna put in a forest utility, right?
I don't know that we could have that as a stipulation to set the public hearing, can we, John? Yeah, because to establish an urban forest utility takes 3 readings of an ordinance. And
Okay.
we won't have time.
All right, okay. So I'll start over, scratch that. I will make a recommendation that we set the levy rate according to option A and the use of police and fire retirement savings of 42.5 and 125,000 in lost to repay Locust Road. And-
but
I don't have to do that, I don't think.
Yeah,
And-
it's already in there.
it do you want included there setting the public hearing, or is this a separate
That's all-
motion?
No, that she is right now doing a motion to set a public hearing
Okay,
with those figures.
okay, that sounds good.
So the levy rate will be 1639
Mhm.
something.
Okay.
And
Ballpark,
change.
Or 40,
and
no.
some change.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion made by Neil, seconded by Olson. Any further discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
I feel like we should probably discuss the nonprofits just because of the amount of communication that I know some of us have been receiving this week from people who are concerned about the council's decision to reduce our support of those two organizations. I'm, obviously we're trying to cut a budget here, but I just wanted to make sure that that was still where the council was at based on the previous week. I know that people are,
My understanding, and I'm glad you brought it up because I wanted to ask Kirk and Randy, is that the seats that we hold, right, are related to the 2080 agreement, not the money that we give in a nonprofit. And when this was discussed, the idea was that the 28E agreement hotel motel funds that go to the hotel motel committee could be allocated as necessary based on priorities of the chamber and Winnebago County Development. Is that correct?
My understanding that we were trying to limit that money for operations.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that is in the 2080s, as Randy pointed out, which was one of the reasons pointed out that if council wanted to basically verbalize, we want you to use those funds out of hotel motel, that go ahead and use those to fund operations. That's why I wanted council to vocalize that if there is interest in changing that 2080, either truly changing it, do an amendment, or just do it.
Okay, so I think we should.
So that's part of it. And then the other part, to your comment, you are correct in that there are chair spots designated as a result of that 2080. That is for the hotel motel steering committee, which is separate. Yes, the chamber and Winnebago County Development and Tourism serve as the financial conduit. Those organizations they get seats at the table as well as part of that hotel motel steering. But some of the communications that I'm aware of are based on the city having seats directly for Winnebago County Development and Tourism or the chamber because of the nonprofit funding that's provided as a member.
But aren't we giving, we give them funds out of hotel motel as well.
We give those to the hotel motel steering committee and to Decorah Jobs.
So Winnebago County Development gets no funding except for a nonprofit.
Nothing direct, correct?
ideally Decorah Jobs typically tries to make a contribution to them, but it's money's tight for everybody, so.
Chamber. $500.
Yeah, it's about 2,000. Yeah, it's 2,000 a year, I think.
Running the audit.
I think that there are fewer better investments in the city than in the work that the county development and tourism and Decorah Jobs do in terms of grant writing and, grant awarding. Like it's multiples of their salary in terms of the dollars that they bring in for different projects in this city. But I also think that the appropriate funding mechanism for those two organizations is out of hotel motel money. And right now we have entered into agreements with two other organizations. They have relationships, but they're different organizations to give them a lot of our hotel motel money. And I wish that we knew this was coming because I would have done those negotiations differently. Because I really do think hotel motel money is what should pay for, our contributions to all of these worthwhile organizations. And that's why I thought Kirk's
Mhm.
thought last week was a good one. if there's a way for us to continue to support the chamber, which I understand is a function that many cities do, they support their chamber of commerce, recognizing that the chamber is kind of Decorah's welcoming, station in terms of that office and what it does and to promote and welcome people to this town. I'd like to see us try to find a way to keep that commitment until the next time we can renegotiate our hotel motel 2080s.
So can we make an amendment that the hotel motel can be used for operations? And then the hotel motel committee can then use those funds?
It can't be unilateral. The hotel motel steering committee would have to vote and approve that amendment as well. So yes, we can on our end, but that does not require them to make that change.
So I think that I think we should try to do that. And then figure out what happens after that. And address if we need to do something different at that point.
I'm not following you. Are you saying that we should just wait and see what happens with the hotel motel committee and if they decide to spend money that way, or?
No, if they're willing to negotiate with the city to open up the agreement so that we can let the hotel motel committee know that they can use the fund for operations. That's what you're saying, right? So let's say that the hotel motel committee is like, yeah, we want to give money to the chamber for operations. Right now, they can't currently. But if we can meet and all agree, we can make an amendment to the 2080 agreement that those funds can be used for operations, which I think was our intent when we did this, when we cut that funding. I think we all were, at least I was, under the impression.
We were trying to shift
Yeah.
money out away from the general fund to.
Yeah. And so really what we're doing is we're asking the hotel motel committee to meet with us so that we can make that actually happen.
Well, I think we shouldn't leave jobs out of this discussion.
I agree.
And I wonder if we could ask both organizations if they'd be willing to open up their 2080, not to change it so that they're funding the chamber and Winnebago County development, but to just reduce our allocations to them so that we can make allocations to these two out of the hotel motel money.
We could do that too.
Because I'd like to be clear where the money's coming from.
Sure. I mean, I'm okay with any of that. We just need to.
But that's a contract that we have and we're
That
locked
would
into.
be-
for 4 years. So that's
Unless they're willing to negotiate that contract with us.
So you're saying, Steve, that we would actually still be giving that funding like we always have been for nonprofit, but we're just going to allocate it differently?
I'd just like it to come out of hotel motel money.
Okay.
And that said, all of our hotel motel money's allocated up to 500K now.
Right.
But that's a short term. I mean, it's just 4 years. If we can figure out a way to bridge the gap in the meantime, or if jobs or hotel motel would be willing to voluntarily accept a reduction in the allocations so that we can continue to fund these organizations at our historic levels.
Right.
I feel like that'd be a good way forward. If not, maybe we can find money elsewhere in the budget. Because I do think these are important functions.
I would agree with that. I mean, you
Okay.
can sit on hotel motel. Do you think at the very least hotel motel would be open to an amendment that would allow operations?
I think so.
Have to ask them now to take a reduction. Trust with council.
Mhm.
Organizations. I don't want to say heated, but back and forth negotiation where we finally got all parties happy. Now you're gonna ask them a year later, make further reductions so that you can save face by giving money out.
Well, a
It's-
couple of things. One, you're on council too. Second, it isn't that we're asking them to take a reduction. We're saying use the money and make sure you're supporting chamber.
Different stores.
Reduction, and then we can be the good guy to give you money out of the hotel motel. But we're gonna keep more of it back and then give it to you.
I mean, it is in fact Decorah taxpayers' money, not Decorah jobs money, not hotel motel. Well, we own it as a city and it comes from us. We tax it. And we choose to disperse it in a certain way. And we're in a contract, but we're also in a unprecedented time of necessitated budget change. I mean, the status quo, Randy, right now is they get zeroed out and there's nothing for them. Excuse me, Mayor.
You got your microphone on.
I do. Is it not? Yeah,
Oh, I know. It's Randy that doesn't have. his-
Well, I don't think any of this discussion necessarily is going to change where we want the levy to be. And so I do think we can,
Well,
Well, I
you-
think in a
start that
perfect- I
conversation
think-
with
I think we all agree we would like to have just gone on the way the world has gone on forever, but when you have $400,000 to cut from your budget, things have to be cut. Now, I'm not convinced that we haven't made more staff changes than we should, but if this is where you're at right now for this year, I think, we'll have to just kind of roll with it. But I think, going forward, you're probably going to have to cut more staff in the future, in the near future.
so we currently have a motion and a second.
Mhm.
So the hotel motel stuff would be separate from that motion as we've got it now.
Correct, yeah, because again, a lot of this stuff can be hashed and adjusted afterwards. The biggest thing right now is property taxes levied. And those conversations on hotel motel tax and those distributions are not going to impact the budget from that standpoint.
well, I
Okay.
guess I'm fine with a vote as long as staff hears that I don't want this to be the end of this conversation, just zeroing them out and moving on. I'd like to at least look and see if there's a way around it.
So,
Okay,
urban forest utility has been discussed a little bit in this conversation. And again, this is part that can be adjusted afterwards and made afterwards, but if that's established and the urban forest or the forester moves into that frees up, for lack of a better term, 70,000 electric franchise fees that can be used for essentially any purpose that had otherwise been used for the urban forester. So
Not-
those could go elsewhere.
not 70 because we want to make sustainability whole with the 25 we're taking out.
Well, and that's
Right.
absolutely within council's purview.
Right.
So if you subtract 25, you got almost 45,000, which is enough to cover those two.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have other funds.
That's again, if an urban forest
it all works,
utility is
yeah.
created, forester expenses shifted over to that. Those funds are then moved to the general fund and then distributions made.
But we're all in agreement that these nonprofits should not be funded from the general fund anymore. If we fund them, we have to find a different way to do it. Okay.
Okay,
I have one question about the hotel motel funds. When we allocated hotel motel funds, we gave a certain percentage to Park Rec, we gave a certain percentage to hotel motel jobs, but we kept some.
There's
What-
the remaining balance over 500,000. So the first 500,000
Right.
is allocated.
So, and we've not made any over 500,000 yet.
We're at 502 right now
Okay.
and we
But
still have more
we
to
s-
come.
Yep, we have more to come, but we also have Bolton and Mink that was a council
mhm,
decision to use hotel motel tax dollars to pay for that.
Yep. Okay.
okay. Any further discussion? Roll call?
Neil,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Luce,
Aye.
Zittergruen.
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel.
Motion carried. For public hearing on April 3rd. Consider Winnebago County Fair Board MOU.
Okay, I believe everyone has a copy of an MOU, which is very much like last year's MOU. Short of the elimination, if you remember last year, there was an additional race that was held on a Sunday for nationals. I can't remember the exact acronym, but short of that, everything else remains the same. Races would still run on Saturday. It would be anticipated that races be completed by 10:30. That on rare occasion, races may continue till 11 due to rain delays and other circumstances. But in no circumstance would races extend beyond 11 PM. As a reminder, we talked about this last year. But again, pointing it out that under Iowa Code, section 174.3, city ordinances, county ordinances, resolutions have no authority, no jurisdiction over fairgrounds. And so this MOU is, it cannot be a binding contract, nor can we enforce city code on the fairgrounds. This is explicitly stated in Iowa code. And so again, want to point that out, that this is just that
Memorandum of understanding.
memorandum of understanding. Anything else to
Anybody
add,
has any
Zach?
questions, feel free to ask. Yep,
This is the same as last year, right?
correct. I
I
thought it went really well last,
I think it did
everything went really well. I had one complaint the one week we raced on Sunday but other than that, everything went really well.
I still hear from people every summer and I think their voice matters too. I know that lots of people want the races and lots of people, know that that the raises mean that they lose something that's really valuable to them, which is a rare summer weekend evening in Decorah that's quiet and peaceful. It's like, I know that people are saying it's only, however many races it is, 10 or whatever, but I do think the races make a big ask of the community. And I don't think there's an easy solution, especially given the state of Iowa code on this one. But it's not like there are that many summer weekend evenings. They're a precious resource. And I hope that the racetrack continues to be mindful of that in inspecting the cars, making sure that noise reduction devices are actually installed and not just, required with quotes around it. And I hope y'all are really mindful to hew very closely to these times. I appreciated last year and I hope that continues. And I guess finally, it's an expression of gratitude to people of Decorah who, for better or worse, have to put up with it. So I think that, that's a thanks that the whole community is owed from your organization. And that's all.
Okay,
Move the acceptance of the memorandum of understanding.
motion made by Luz, seconded by Chisel to accept the memorandum of understanding. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Luce,
Aye.
Chisel, Zittergrun.
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Olson.
Hi,
Motion carried. Discussion of police chief.
All right, as the council's aware, and I think the public's aware, Chief Smutzler has turned in his resignation effective June 30th. And so wanted to, June 30th is going to come quickly. So get a jump started on this conversation on the search to replace the chief position. My understanding is that when Chief Smutzler was hired, Jeff Kaler of Kaler Consulting was contracted. I'm hopeful the council had a positive interaction with Jeff. I also used him in Humboldt to hire our police chief over in Humboldt. I was happy with that process and product as a result. There are only 2 individuals that I'm familiar with in the state of Iowa that perform this type of service that are specialized to law enforcement. There's a couple other executive searches out there, no doubt. But one way we could potentially get a jump on this, the city, since it is a service, we don't have to do any kind of competitive bid. If the council was happy with Jeff Kaler last time this happened, we could potentially just get a proposal from Jeff Kaler for consideration at the next council meeting. So that's an option. Otherwise, we could look at potentially issuance of an RFQ and get those qualifications, score them, then get a proposal and work forward with the individual that's selected.
you need a motion to do
Uh,
that, to go
don't
forward
nec-
on that?
Don't need a
Okay,
motion, because we don't have anything actionable
Okay.
at this time, but if I can get general consensus from the council.
I was very pleased with how it was handled last time. I thought it was very organized and well-run from start to finish.
Yeah, I appreciated his expertise in the police field and what he brought to the table. He was very good.
I will tell you that when Humboldt used Jeff Kaler, that we actually hired a police chief that openly said if it was not for Jeff Kaler, his involvement, he would have overlooked the city because it's a community of 5,000 people and was not on his radar. So I know there's going to be some questions on why are we hiring a consultant when we're just talking about budget cuts? I will flat out tell you that one, this is a specialized position that it's honestly above my pay grade to try and perform the candidate selection process. And so strongly encourage a consultant, and given Jeff Kaler's background with the city, my involvement with him in the past, as well as his previous work experience as the police chief for the city of Carroll for nearly 30 years, he has a lot of contacts.
No, and talking to you and even Chief Smutzler, I mean, I think it's a good idea to go forward with this guy. That's the whole thing.
Yes, I think this is a great way forward. We obviously need, to replace a position. It sounds like this is the best way to do it. I do want to ask whether, whenever there's staffing changes, I feel like we've been saying we need to take advantage of the opportunity to assess the staffing situation. And I'm hoping that our staff is, using this as an opportunity to look at the staffing situation and at even schedules to make sure that the police department is operating as efficiently and effectively as possible for Decorah. So I feel like those two things can happen at the same time. As we fill the position, we can also, assess if the schedules and the staffing situation are where they should be for the police department.
Yeah, and the, scheduling, it's that's one of those things that it is actually locked into the union contract that they work 12-hour shifts, which create a little bit of difficulty especially when you're running short on officers. So I do agree with you that scheduling might be something we want to take a look at, because a shift away from 12 can result in easier scheduling when you're short staffed. And honestly, in my opinion, and maybe the officers will disagree with me on this, but it's hard to work 12-hour shifts. And I'll just leave it there.
That's definitely when we start to work in more detail.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted this to be part of the conversation as we're assessing candidates and kind of,
No, I
I
think
just want to make sure we're considering all options.
No, I think this is a perfect time for that. We've got all new leadership in the police department right now, and I think this is a good time to look into that. Yeah.
So the recommendation appears to be to bring forth to the council in the next meeting information on Kaler.
It seems to be a majority of.
Yeah,
of
no,
head
I'm
nods.
good with it. I was not on council this last time, but I heard great things. So
Okay,
So I'll reach out to Jeff and ask for him to draft a proposal for council consideration.
okay.
I don't know what it was, Decorah 15.
I think it was something like that. Yeah.
I would say around 15,000 is where I would anticipate.
Okay, vacancies on the following board. I know that we will have an application for the telecommunication board. We might have the potential for civil service commission. We have no potential so far as the Board of Appeals. Let's see, that being said, we go to the city manager's report.
Okay, so state of Iowa's passed the first funnel. We've seen some funny stuff, but want to point out a couple things. We'll start out on one note, SF 480, which would actually allow for the city's public posting requirement. We would no longer have to send to the newspaper that if SF 480 were passed, it would require the Department of Management, I believe, create a website that all cities could pay $5 flat fee for a posting on there and meet the public posting requirement. So that's a bill out there that quite honestly, it gets talked about a lot, but never seems to gain any steam. So that wanted to point out that positive.
And that actually has passed the funnel, correct?
Correct. Yes. All these I'm reporting on are out of funnel
Okay,
or
thank you.
funnel proof for the last one. SF 174 would actually residential bill, prohibit cities from regulating design elements or requirements within a residential dwelling. Not going to be a large consideration for the most part for Decorah, but just an item to note. SF 455 had a large amendment, but this is the bill. And I haven't been able to dive through the amendment that was passed last week. This is the one that talks about pre versus post construction stormwater requirements. And so it's turned more into a topsoil regulation bill that would say you can have post versus pre requirements, but the pre for in Decorah, we use if it was grass, 100% grass. That's our assumption for pre-construction. This bill would say if you had a parking lot to start, that's your pre-construction. So you can't, if you had a parking lot, you can repave it and you're fine. There's some other things in there. Like I said, I haven't had a chance to review all the the amendments. Jeremy, did you get a chance to look at that one by any chance? No. There's several automated traffic enforcement bills out there. One that seems to have decent traction is actually Senator Klemesh's bill that he calls it reasonable regulation. If I remember correctly, his would require that 10% of the revenue generated would have to go to the road use tax fund and then be distributed out, as well as puts caps on what types of enforcement can be done with ATEs. But again, there's several of them out there running from full ban to just excessive regulation. SF 356, which used to be Senate Study Bill 1124. That's the one that we've talked about a lot with creating the consolidated tax, consolidated general fund levy. No activity on it last week as expected because it's funnel week and it is funnel proof. So they worked on everything else. Senate Study Bill 1125, which is the one that talks about local option sales tax primarily, as well as commercial property rollback, has not gone through committees. So it's still Senate Study Bill 1125, but funnel proof. So it can at any time, we do suspect it's going to go through committee this week. This one's actually being championed somewhat aggressively and being termed by some as a Christmas tree bill, where it has a little something for everyone under the tree, which is why it's gaining some steam.
Except for cities, but
Yeah.
Correct.
and schools.
Okay.
That's all I have.
What about the short-term rental?
Oh, yes. So that, I apologize. I don't know that it made it through funnel. Did you happen to see? I didn't notice that, John. Yeah, because that was the positive that I reported back at the last meeting, but I don't know that it made it through.
Maybe you can look it up and,
Yeah, if you want to move on, we'll look it up real quick.
okay. Carrie,
Just the Kaler Consulting was 12,300. In our office, we are continuing to work on with Laserfish and Civic to try to become more electronic. And we have also started discussions on the rentals to start putting those on our website and the status of whether they failed or passed inspection. We just thought that, so we're starting to look at that. Some other
Awesome.
cities are doing it as a useful tool for the public.
That's
So
awesome.
we started those conversations.
anything else? Department heads.
Just wanted to add a couple notes, both for council and primarily for the public about the budget process this year. As you know, the library is taking a sizable hit in the budget process, but I did want to point out that this was a real team effort between department heads and the city to figure out what makes the most sense going forward. while there are some sacrifices on the library side this year, ultimately what's good for the city is good for the library. And it doesn't serve us to fight not to contribute our share if that means that the city is in a bad financial position going forward. That just prolongs the pain for everybody. So I don't want folks to go forward with the viewpoint that the library is being unfairly picked on, because equal dollars doesn't necessarily mean equitable impact. And what I mean by that is when we sat down as department heads and with city staff and looked at the priorities of various departments and where things are within those departments, the library was a little better positioned than some to be able to make some of those sacrifices with the impacts to taxpayers being less. We're able to find some efficiencies, we're able to switch some things around. And ultimately, the goal of all the department heads was to meet the cut goals set by council with the least possible impact being felt by the folks that we're providing those services to, which are, of course, the taxpayers of Decorah. So, yes, it looks like the library is, making some big sacrifices, but ultimately we can do that with the outcome still being as positive as it can be for Decorah citizens. And I would also like to highlight out of the general fund departments that were primarily impacted by this, the main ones being Park Rec and the library. Park Rec has already increased their fees and is giving over $75,000 to help offset the budget deficit. So I think that's important to keep in mind, as well as members of the public are thinking about who gave what and how does this break down. Certainly it wasn't the case that others didn't contribute very significantly, and certainly other departments contributed as well. So I won't go on at length about that, but I just want to make it clear that it was really a team effort for the good of the city and for the good of the citizens. And I felt really positively about how that all went down. And I think my compatriots at this table did as well. So if people
Thank
have
you.
questions on council or in the public, they're welcome to contact me, and I'd be happy to talk further about that.
Hey, thank you very much, Kristen, for that clarification.
Yes, thank you
How
very
about-
much. I want to say too that, well, thank you for your, I guess, your diplomacy on the part of all the department heads, but to all of you who made tough decisions this time, thank you. And thank you for being deliberative and working together. I appreciate your explanation and admire you for making it tonight. Thank you.
Andy, do you have anything for us?
No fish in the truck?
Oh, there you go. Well, that's one positive move towards warmer weather, correct? Okay, let's see. Who we can start with? How
Just
about-
real quickly,
Sure.
John was able to pull up. Neither one of those bills did make it through funnel. There was
Okay,
a House file and a Senate file companion. Neither one made it through funnel.
what was the other one?
House file. Got 347, well, that's a Senate file. Senate file 347 and House file 296.
Okay. All right, Randy? Emily?
No, I want to echo Kirk's thanks and gratitude to city staff for figuring this out and for keeping the taxpayer in mind. Really appreciate that. And your diplomacy, Kristen, is beyond words. So thank you. I was going to call, but I don't know when. I feel like we should have a public safety meeting. I was actually thinking about cameras, but we'll hold off on that. But we are supposed to have a negotiation with rural fire in May. And just looking at our spring schedule, I would actually like to have a city public safety meeting to discuss what we would like to see out of that meeting. Rather than coming to that meeting, I want us to be ready And whether ready means we're going to send them a letter ahead of time, or I'd like to just have that conversation with public safety. So ideally, I know no one likes meetings after, but I could work with Travis to either do it before one. Or
I
an
like
after.
meetings after.
You're okay with meetings after? Okay.
Might I offer Emily, I know the council talked about doing fire station the fire station project as the work session for the end of March.
Okay.
So
Do you
is
think we can do those two things together? Those are big.
just throwing it out there as an option that, council meeting plus the committee or work session plus committee. I mean, they're both going to run somewhat longer.
Okay.
So just throwing it out there as an option.
Okay. That'll work. I'll work with you to
Yep.
get that scheduled.
Okay,
So thanks.
thanks. Kirsten.
Over the weekend, I attended the Oneota Film Festival. I saw, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 different films. Each one was better than the next. I think this was a great idea that we moved this thing to the downtown area. I saw lots of people out and about downtown. I know my wife and I ran up quite a tab at T-Box going there over and over and over again as we saw different films and stuff like that. So I think it was a really well done idea to move it downtown. And it was very well attended. That's it.
I actually had a Zoom meeting with the Iowa League city managers and the mayors together. And we felt that that was a good way to help each other out, as far as especially for smaller cities that don't have managers, but you also make the communication a lot better and be able to help each other. And we'll continue to work through that.
Nothing, Mayor.
Steve Zittergren?
Yeah, again, profound thanks to the staff and there's I don't know, it's been gratifying to see how collaboratively and peacefully we've made these hard decisions. I had something else, but I've forgotten it, Mayor.
Okay.
So make a note of that. I forgot something.
Forgot something. Kirk,
Nothing, Mayor.
okay. Move to adjourn. Okay, thank you.